Hi everybody, welcome back to another Fractured Fairy Tale group for speech class. This is our third week of doing this, so we'll get a little bit quicker with the opening slides and then we will get to our new story. Here we go. As we have been doing every single week, we are going to compare and contrast a modern fairy tale or a fractured fairy tale with its traditional version. So again, do you remember what these words mean? When we say we're going to compare something, we want to know what makes those two things the same or alike or similar, those sort of words. When we say we're going to contrast some things, we want to know what makes the two items that we're looking at different from one another, how they are separate, that sort of thing. All right, as we move forward, we're going to continue to use our Venn diagram. That is the visual that looks like two circles sitting on top of each other. Remember, the area in the middle where the two circles both have space is where we talk about our comparing information, those things that are the same or alike or have in common, are similar, things they both do. Okay? It's the outside circle, where the parts where the circle is independent from the other one, that talks about how we are going to contrast the information, how those things are unalike, how they differ, and that sort of thing. Remember, these are words you can use if you are going to speak or write about comparing and contrasting two items. Okay, so first let's take a look at two pictures. How are these two things, or how are we going to compare and contrast these two pictures? On this side, we have a man playing baseball. Looks like he's playing professional baseball. He's probably the pitcher. He's throwing the ball, right? His glove is down here, his hand's up here, and there's a ball. He's probably not catching it with a bare hand, so we can assume he is throwing the ball. On this side, we have a young boy who is also playing baseball. He has his glove right here and the ball is inside it, so we can assume that he is catching the baseball. All right, so let's talk about how these pictures first compare to each other. So like we said, both of these people are playing baseball. I picked this one because, guys, baseball's coming back. You can watch your favorite teams before too much longer. Pretty excited about that. Next, they're both wearing a uniform. When you play on a team, you tend to wear a uniform, right? And they're both outside. You can see the sunshine, and usually we play baseball outside. It would be difficult to hit a home run if you were inside. All right, so the person on this side is throwing the ball, like we said. The person on the other side is catching it. So that is different, that contrasts. All right. The person on this side is an adult. He's a grown-up, but this is just a child. So they're playing very different baseball. This is professional baseball. This is something called Little League, probably. All right, but that's the basic differences. It's not too different being an adult versus being a child playing baseball. Okay, feel comfortable with that? Let's take a look at our story. Okay, so our stories today are going to be The Princess and the Pea versus The Princess and the Pizza. So that's what we're going to compare and contrast. If you don't already know the story of The Princess and the Pea, basically it goes a long, long time ago. There was a prince who could not find the perfect princess. So his mom, the queen, decided to invite princesses or girls from the kingdom to come to the castle and compete for the prince. So one at a time, She would invite them to dinner and have them stay the night. And each time while they were eating dinner, she would sneak into the bedroom that they were going to use, stack 13 mattresses on top of each other, and then put a teeny tiny pea, that little bitty pea that you might eat for dinner, underneath the bottom mattress. And then she would wait. Well, the next morning, the princess would have, or the girl would have slept on those 13 mattresses. And they would come to breakfast in the morning, and the queen would say, "Oh, my dear, how did you sleep?" And the princesses or the girls would say, "Oh, it was wonderful. All those mattresses were so comfortable, and I slept really well. Thank you so much for having me." And the queen would say, "Well, I'm sorry you did not pass the test. If you were a true princess meant for my son, you would have felt the teeny tiny pea under all the mattresses." But she never told anybody that there was a pea under all these mattresses. Well, this goes on for weeks and weeks and months. And the queen and the prince still have not found the perfect princess for the prince to marry. And finally, they invite this young woman from the kingdom, and everybody kind of rolls their eyes. It's like a Cinderella story kind of thing. She's not a real princess. Well, she comes to dinner, and everything goes fine. And she goes to bed, and there's 13 mattresses on her bed. And she's like, "Well, that's weird." So she pulls all the mattresses off the bed because she's not used to sleeping on such cushy material. And when she does, she finds the pea, and she thinks, I've heard that the queen keeps saying that nobody is a perfect princess, that they didn't pass her test. I bet the pea is the test. So the next morning, when she goes down to breakfast, she stretches and she rolls her neck, and the queen's like, "Oh, my dear, are you okay? Did you sleep well last night?" She said, "No, I don't know what it was, but it felt like I was being stabbed in the back all night long." And the queen realizes, she felt the pea, or thinks that she means, she felt the pea. So she's like, "You are it. You are perfect. You are the perfect princess material." So the girl gets to marry the prince, and as those sayings go, they lived happily ever after. Okay, so we have that version of the story. A princess, queen competition, trying to go for marrying the queen or the prince and eventually becoming queen, and all that stuff. So now I want you to listen to the book, The Princess and the Pizza, and then we will compare and contrast those two stories to one another. Enjoy. The Princess and the Pizza by Mary Jane and Herm Ock. Princess Paulina needed a job. Her father had given up his throne to become a woodcarver and moved them to a humble shack in a neighboring kingdom. Since the king was still learning, his carvings didn't sell, and Paulina's garden barely kept enough on the table. Paulina missed princessing. She missed walking the peacock in the royal garden, surveying the kingdom from the castle tower, and doing the princess wave in the royal processions. Paulina tried walking a stray chicken around the shack, but it only pecked at her bare toes. She surveyed the kingdom from the shack's leaky roof, made even more holes. She tried princess waving to the townspeople from her father's cart, but nobody bothered to wave back. They just thought she was swatting at flies. One day, a page rode past the shack announcing that Queen Zelda of Bloom was seeking a true princess to become a bride for her son, Princess Rupert. "This is my chance to get back to princessing," Paula cried. She rummaged through her trunk of ex-princess stuff, brushed the wood shavings from her best ball gown, and blew away the bits of sawdust that clung to her diamond tiara. Then she tucked a piece of garlic into her bodice for good luck.
snipped some fragrant herbs to cover up the garlic smell, and headed for the castle. Paulina didn't expect much competition. There wasn't another princess for hundreds of miles. But when she got to Bloom Castle, Paulina found that she was only one of 12 princesses hoping to become the royal bride. When she looked into her assigned room, Paulina saw her bed piled with 16 mattresses. Oh, for Pete's sake. The old Princess and the Pea trick. That's so once upon a time. Naturally, Paulina didn't sleep at all that night because she felt the lumpy pea through all of those mattresses. When the 12 princesses gathered in the throne room the next morning, the 7 who looked bright-eyed were sent home. Now only Paulina and 4 other sleepy princesses remained. First, they were made to write essays entitled, "Why I Want to Have the Gracious and Exquisitely Beautiful Queen Zelda for My Mother-in-Law." Prince Drupert and Queen Zelda finally appeared on the balcony. Queen Zelda did all the talking. "Congratulations, ladies. You have written some lovely essays which I will keep in my scrapbook. And you have all passed the mattress test. But to make absolutely sure you are of royal blood, there is a second test. Only a true princess can wear these glass slippers." "For Pete's sake, you never heard of sneakers?" Paulina asked. Queen Zelda gave Paulina a sharp look. "Nobody said you had to hike in them. Just try them on." After the royal page made his way around the room with the slippers, 2 big-footed princesses were sent home. Now only Paulina and 2 others remained. One was followed around by 7 strange little men, and the other had such a long braid dragging behind her, Paulina kept tripping over it. "For Pete's sake, you never heard of scissors?" Paulina cried. Queen Zelda glared at Paulina. "You all have passed the second princess test. Your final task is to cook a feast that proves you are worthy of being my dear Drupert's wife." This set up a wail from among the princesses, especially Paulina. "For Pete's sake, you have no royal chef?" "Silence," said the queen. "The table holds the makings for 3 fine feasts. Choose well, for the winner will become my dear Drupert's bride." As Paulina started for the table, the long-haired princess tripped her, then loaded up with food. By the time Paulina got there, the 7 strange little men had run off with everything but some flour, yeast, water, 3 overripe tomatoes, and a hunk of stale cheese. "Hey, that's not fair. Queen Zelda, will you help me?" "No," said the queen, "because you have a big mouth." A servant escorted Paulina to her room and locked the door. "Hey, how can I cook without a bowl or spoon or pots?" There was no reply. Paulina tried to make bread, kneading the flour, water, and yeast together, but it only stuck to the tray in a flattened mess. She squished the tomatoes over the dough to brighten it up. It looked awful. She sprinkled cheese gratings over the top, and it was still a mess, and Paulina was exhausted. "For Pete's sake, where's your fairy godmother when you need her? I'm going to take a nap." She reached under the pile of mattresses, pulled out the offending pea, and climbed into bed. She hadn't been sleeping long when there was a knock at the door. "Only 20 minutes left," called Queen Zelda. "I don't smell anything cooking." "I'm not cooking," she said. "I'm napping. Then I'm gonna go home." "You're not going anywhere," said Queen Zelda. "The losers will be beheaded." Paulina sat bolt upright. "Beheaded? You didn't tell us that." "I forgot," said the queen. "Can't I have a second chance? How about I try to spin straw into gold, or maybe I could guess a weird little man's name?" "No second chances," declared the queen. But that's not fair, Paulina cried. Who needs to be fair? I'm the queen. Paulina hopped out of bed and ran to the window, but it was an unbelievably long drop to the ground. The meal was her only hope. She rushed the tray over to the fireplace, stirred the few remaining hot coals, then crushed her garlic and sprinkled it over the mess for good luck. Finally, Paulina tossed on the herbs to cover up the garlic smell. The other princesses had made lovely feasts, especially the one who had 7 strange little men to help her. Prince Drupert went right to Paulina's tray. It's not pretty, but it smells scrumptious. He helped himself to an unusually generous piece. What do you call this dish? Paulina shrugged. I don't know. It can't be an official entry in the contest if it doesn't have a name. Oh, for Pete's sake, Paulina muttered. What's that? Snapped the queen. Pete's what? Remembering the beheading threat, Paulina frantically tried to think of a name. It's Pete's, Pizza? The queen took a bite. Odd name, but it's tasty. The winner is Paulina's Pizza. You mean I won't be beheaded? I was only kidding about the beheading, said the queen. Then I was only kidding about wanting to marry Prince Drupert. Who needs him? I have other plans. Will you leave your recipe? Asked the queen. No way, said Paulina. It's just become a family secret. She headed for the door. I liked you best, whined the queen, following close behind. Oh, for Pete's sake, muttered Paulina as she stomped across the drawbridge. Today's specials. These look gross. Butterscotch and broccoli, chocolate and chicken, avocado and apricot, pickle and parsnip, and rosemary and rhubarb. Princess Paulina's Pizza Palace opened a few weeks later. It featured unusual carved furniture and 50 kinds of pizza. Every Thursday, on the royal chef's night off, Queen Zelda and Prince Drupert came to Paulina's for popcorn pineapple pizza. They often stayed to play cards with Paulina's father. From then on, whenever Paulina drove her pizza delivery cart through town doing the princess wave, everybody waved back and ran after her, asking about the day's specials. Life was good. Paulina was grateful not to have Queen Zelda for a mother-in-law, but she still worried about one little thing. She worried about getting Queen Zelda as her stepmother. The end.
Okay, so let's compare and contrast the story of the Princess and the Pea and that story of the Princess and the Pizza. I hope you liked that one. It is very silly. So here we go. When we compare them, when we talk about how they were the same, we see that both have princess competitions. Both of them have a queen that is trying to marry off her son, the prince, and she comes up with a strategy to do that. In both of the stories, the queen hides a pea under like 13 mattresses and expects only a true princess to be able to feel it. And finally, the princesses are expecting to be able to marry the prince if she wins the competition. But how are these two stories different? Okay. Well, in the story of the Princess and the Pea, they only bring one princess in at a time. They kind of keep that secret. But in the story of the Princess and the Pizza, we see all of the princesses arrive together, and they're there at the same time. In the Princess and the Pea, the main character is the only one who feels the pea, and that's how she wins the competition. But in the Princess and the Pizza, we have several princesses that feel the pea, so they have to continue the competition, and they end up having the shoe competition, kind of like Cinderella, And then they have the cooking competition where our main character, Princess, makes the pizza and wins the competition. And finally, in The Princess and the Pea, we see the princess marry the prince and live happily ever after. However, in The Princess and the Pizza, the princess realizes that she doesn't need to marry the prince, and she opens her own pizza shop. So what did you think? The same of the similarities and differences. Which one did you prefer? The traditional Princess and the Pea story or the fractured fairy tale version, The Princess and the Pizza? All right, guys, I hope that you had kind of a fun time doing this. I hope comparing and contrasting is getting really easy for you. Leave me a comment on your Google Classroom or shoot me an email if you have any questions or if it's still really difficult and you would like some help. Go ahead and take that quiz, the Fractured Fairy Tale number 4 quiz, and let me know what you thought, and we will see you next week. And as they say in fairy tale land, the end.